All right, welcome back. We are ACI course 13. This is part 2 of class 3. It's June 14th, 2026, where I am. Let's gather our minds here as we usually do. Please bring your attention to your breath until you hear from me again. Now bring to mind that being who for you is a manifestation of ultimate love, ultimate compassion, ultimate wisdom, and see them there with you just by way of your thinking of them. They are gazing at you with their unconditional love for you, smiling at you with their holy great compassion, their wisdom radiating from them, that beautiful golden glow encompassing you in its light. And then we hear them say, bring to mind someone you know who's hurting in some way. Feel how much you would like to be able to help them. Recognize how the worldly ways we try fall short. How wonderful it will be when we can also help them in some deep and ultimate way, a way through which they will go on to stop their distress forever. Deep down, we know this is possible. Studying emptiness and karma, we glimpse how it's possible. And so I invite you to grow that wish into a longing. And that longing into an intention. And with our intention strong, we turn our minds back to our precious holy being. We know that they know what we need to know, what we need to learn yet, what we need to do yet. Become one who can help this other in this deep and ultimate way. And so we ask them, please, please, please teach me that, show me that. Help me become that. And they are so happy that we've asked. Of course, they agree. Our gratitude arises. We want to offer them something exquisite. And so we think of the pure world they are teaching us how to create. We imagine we can hold it in our hands and we offer it to them, following it with our promise to practice what they teach us, using our refuge prayer to make our promise. Here is the great earth, filled with fragrant incense and covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain, 4 lands, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we realize Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may all beings totally awaken for the benefit of every single other. So last class, we learned that things that are generals means those things that are in charge of other things, right? Yes. Don't bite. If you say yes, you need to answer. Or you have to say why. If you say no, that makes me say something else. Are things that are general. She, we call them general because they're in charge of everybody, right? No, Claire says no. So you mean there's one single definition of what it means to be a thing that is general. One single definition. No, there's more than one definition. More than one way to define what we mean by a thing that is general. I'll give you a hint. We learned 3. There's probably more, but we learned 3. So nobody can give me the definition of one of those 3 things that are general.
Chetrak,
Rikchi,
Rikchi, Dunchi,
Chi. We're
and
talking about those
Tsokchi.
kinds. Okay, Tsokchi. So the definition of Tsokchi is what?
A physical collection of past thoughts.
Exactly.
Tsokchi.
And an example?
Mm.
A water pitcher, right? A car.
Oh, cup.
Good. Who can give us another definition of a chi? Another kind of chi. Somebody do the easy one, I'll do the hard one. The general as far as a quality, remember? A type, a type quality.
Rick cheese, the easy one?
The
I thought
the
Drachi was easy because Drachi is the restaurant you want to go to. You've never been there before.
the that is an easy one. We just didn't get the formal definition of that one. The easy one's the rikchi. Soak cheese, the easiest one. Rick cheese, pretty easy too. A type quality, which means an existing thing which subsumes the multiple things which are of its type. And an example, the classical example of rikchi is knowable things, because it's an umbrella term and there are so many things inside it. And then a third, it was the second one we learned, type of chi was dun chi. And I'm going to read from the answer key. Meaning a general as far as objects, which is curious that they call it that. A general as far as objects, otherwise known as an actual mental image. This is the dunchi. The answer key says, the one for a water pitcher is defined as that element which is imputed to be the water pitcher, but which is not. That thing which appears to be the water pitcher to the conceptual state of mind which is perceiving a water pitcher, but which is, however, not the water pitcher. And thank goodness Geshe-la just explained that before he gave us that. What that means to say is there's a first instant of perceiving an object, and in the second instant, our mind's mental image gives us its identity. And it's that getting the identity mental image that is this general as far as object. So with that one, I remember learning this, doing my homework or doing my quiz, because this is on the quiz. It's also on the final, sorry. And I just had to memorize that phrase and write it down because I didn't understand what it meant. But I could think what that all means is the pot on the stove thing. And I just kept remembering that second instant water pillar, blah, 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 is all about the mental seeds going down on information. So the information at this level is there, it's being perceived, but before we can identify that information, this mental seed has to open and come down onto it, as Geshe-la describes, right? Called the dunchi. So the mental image landing on the thing makes the object. It's a mental image we're experiencing, and we're mistaking it for the object saying, I am a pen, I am a water pillar. When really it's our mental image saying, that's a water pitcher, that's a pen. Okay? So then to get just a little bit deeper, our mental image that's laying on the pot on the stove includes the pot on the stove from it. Do you see why it's so slippery? Because just because now we know things are mental images, that doesn't automatically be that seeing the sea to open and laying on, because our mental image includes the misbelief about the object coming from it. It gets really, really slippery. How do we ever break that cycle? And yet, right, we have a good explanation and logical, faith-based and logic that the cycle is breakable. It's because we have this precious teacher. All right. So why is the study of quality and characteristics so vital for those who wish to experience emptiness directly? So Geshe says the study of general as far as types, Rikchi, and general as far as objects, Dunchi, allows us to understand that when we perceive something, we do so actually by perceiving a mental object and mistaking it for an actual object. This mental object is forced upon us by our past karma. An actual object that existed independent of this process doesn't exist, and its absence is what emptiness is. By realizing directly how we perceive objects through mental images, we realize what the ultimate meaning of dependent origination is. And this realization occurs during the final hours before seeing emptiness directly at the supreme object stage of the path of preparation. So that's why it's important to study this and cogitate it and explore it and play with it to find in our mind those nuances where we don't really want to get it. And that because it's going to crack this nut about our belief in our own self-existence. Okay. So highest school then goes on to say, when we understand about the mental images laying onto the object, and so we understand what's meant by the emptiness of the object, we're seeing how the object does not exist in the way that we thought. And they go on to say how things do exist, which we understand already. They exist as these mental seeds ripening into the mental image. But it still feels like a mental image. How can a mental image be a real thing? My mind still does that. When we get it, when we say, oh, mental image, we'll go, duh, right? That makes it real. And when we're at that point, we know we're on that conveyor belt out. So don't be surprised if, even though we know intellectually what's going on, if every time you tap into it's nothing but a projection, you feel this like, whoa, then it can't be real. It's ignorance doing its thing. So high school, they say Ming De Shak Sam. I guess I need the screen share here. We've heard this before. Ming De Shak Sam. Ming De means name term. Shak Sam means it's only that. Huh. Huh. Didn't write it. Mingdeshakson. We study it in depth later. Mm. They say, where are you? Things exist by way of name and term. It's often said by way of projection. What's meant by Mingde is projection. Name and term. Name means the actual name, pan, or whatever it is in your language. Term means what we know pens are, what they do. Like everything we know about the name pen is the term. So it's like the idea, name and the idea. So high school thing says things exist as established through a name and a term. And then we need to go a little bit further and explain that and say the name and term are forced by karmic seeds ripening. The name and term experience is the karmic seeds ripening. The karmic seeds are there to ripen because we perceived ourselves interacting with some, we name and term perceived ourselves name and term interacting with some other name and term. And that imprinted the mind in such a way that the result of that will be me name and term experiencing some name and term thing forced by those karmic seeds to do it in the way that I do it. So just simplify it and say, I experience whatever I'm experienced by way of a name and a term, and that name and term is forced by the results of karma, and karma is made by my behavior, so that we get the full connection between understanding about name and term and then why we experience what we experience. No, if it's my name and term, why can't I just make it up? I'll just decide. Everybody's the angel. I'm the angel. So let's just go eat chocolate. Nothing else to do. Like, technically, you could do that if we could hold the line no matter what. Maybe some people can. So, Geshe-la, I'm just going to read from what he said. He said, another way of considering Chichadak is to consider the relationship between the term quality, meaning quote quality, meaning qualityness, as in the ideal or the archetype, and a quality or the quality. A quality or the quality is the specific mental image of the experience. The qualityness, the quote quality, doesn't make anything specific. Right? Back to car, quote car versus a car versus the car versus my car, right? All those different specifics, a car, the car, my car. But car, just plain car, right? It has to become a car, even if it's just a cartoon caricature of a car in our mind. a car if we didn't have somehow in our mind the qualityness car? If we didn't know car, could a car ripen in our mind if we had never ever experienced? If we don't have the quality car already? No, we can't. So it becomes this chicken or the egg kind of conundrum. In order to see a car, a first car in this life, we have to already have, quote, car unripened into a thing yet, but it has to have that imprint already in order for mom to be able to teach me car and me to figure out that that sound, that word applies to these particular things. It has to already be in there in some way. Then, as we go from the ideal carness, at each level, it can get more and more specific from quote car to a car, from a car to the car, from the car to that car. They all mean a little bit different, getting more and more specific. At each level, it's another, can I say another mental image? At each level, it is a mental image ripening onto information. So Geshe-la says, have fun exploring mental images and indications and how those two relate to each other and how the ideal, the cardiness, fits into that. He says, don't give up. It's all necessary ammunition for the study of emptiness. Okay, so we've been talking about the chi, things that are general. Now we need to talk about the chedak, things characteristic of the general category. Again, not things that have a characteristic of it, but things that are characteristic of it. We had the simple definition of chi, which was the general as far as type. And then the simple definition of chedak is a member of that general category. But Geshe-la says the real meaning of chedak is a thing characteristic of the quality. There are two classical examples. Nupo, working thing, and Boompa, water pitcher. And they use those two specifically to show how at any given level of experience, we have the chi and its chedak, and what we actually experience is the chedak, mistaking it for a real thing. And then, as we said before, the chedak can become the thing that is general, and then there can be something that's chedak of that. And then there can be something that's chedak of that. So what seemed like this big distinction between the thing that's the ideal and then the specifics of it, we realized that any one of these things specific of that ideal could become the ideal of which something else is more specific. So they explain, Nupo means working thing, also means changing thing. Anything which is changing automatically is doing something. So Nupo, changing thing or working thing, is a chedak for the rikchi knowable things or all existing things. Now, you can take that category working things and say, well, a classical example of working things as a chi is water pitchers, because water pitchers is a thing which is characteristic of working thing, isn't it? Is a water pitcher something which performs a function? Yes. So water pitcher is a specific instant of this general category, things that function. And things that function, that general category is also a specific category for the bigger category of all existing things. Okay? So then we can keep going down and say water pitcher is a chedak of working thing, because what it is to be a water pitcher is to be a working thing. But not all working things are water pitchers. There are many other working things other than water pitchers, but there's no such thing as any water pitcher that's not a working thing. Even a broken water pitcher does something, right? Makes a mess. So this idea of chiza and chedaks, it's a fluid thing. So the way this is worded as we're trying to work it out in our mind, it sounds really stilted in the English, but again, Geshe-la did it very purposefully to help us try to work out what's he really trying to say. Otherwise, we'll hear it and go, yeah, I get it. And we've missed the opportunity to really chew on it. So he said, in our evaluation of whether water pitcher, bumpa, is a chedak, a thing which is characteristic of working thing. He says the way you look at that is you ask, is being a working thing a general quality of which being a water pitcher is characteristic? Is being a working thing a general quality of which being a water pitcher is characteristic? Mm. So there are three ways to check out this relationship between Chedaks and the chi, to see if we truly have a chi Chedak relationship. Three ways to check the thing that we think is characteristic of the general. So what we're working on here as an example is we're checking to see if water pitcher is characteristic of working thingness. Working thing as the Rikchi. So one thing we need to establish first of all before we can answer that is Q Nupo Yin, which means Nupo is working thing, Yin means it is. So Q Nupo Yin means it is a working thing. So we have to check, is the object of our investigation, water pitcher, is it a subset of the set we're looking at, which is working thing? Is a water pitcher a working thing? We already established that. So if we were doing this for something else, let's say motor vehicle and your car, we would have to check to see, is your car an existing thing, which is actually characteristic of the set motor vehicle. And it seems so silly. It's like, come on, you already know that. But the point is, what if you didn't know it? So we check. One of the ways we check is that the thing characteristic of the quality must be only one component of that quality. Because if the thing characteristic of the quality and the quality, if the quality only has that one thing that's characteristic of it, then they're the same thing. You don't have set and subset. You have what we're calling set and what we're calling the thing, but they would overlap. So we look at our water pitcher. Is water pitcher a working thing? Yes, we can say so, because we know that there are other things that are also working things that are not water pitchers. So I can say that this existing thing, water pitcher, makes up is part of the set of things called working things. We do need to establish that we're not talking about the Chedok and the Chi being one and the same thing. And the way we know that is that there are other things. Does that make sense? I hope. So for instance, you wouldn't say all existing, right? We couldn't say all changing things are a subset of all working things. All changing things. If I were to say all changing things are chedak of working things, you would point out to me, wait, all working things and all changing things, those are two different ways to say the same thing. So there's no set subset relationship there. They're synonyms. Same thing. Second way we assess our chedak for our dzogchi is the Kyunupo Dong Dak Chikdu drum down here. Dachik Dudrel means to be one is to be the other, to share a relationship, drel, where to be one is to be the other. Like my example, all changing things and all working things. To be one is to be the other. So they can't have this relationship of set and subset. So we're looking at the thing that we're saying is a subset of working thing. We're looking to see whether to be one thing is to be the other. But we said to be a water pitcher is to be a working thing. They do have that relationship, but it's only a one-way relationship. Because it's not true to say to be a working thing is to be a water pitcher. Because there are many other working things other than water pitchers, as we said before. So we look at the relationship of what we're saying is a chedak of a chi to see if they have this one-way relationship where to be one is to be the other, where to be the chedak is to be the chi, to be the characteristic is to be the quality, but not to be the quality is to be the thing characteristic of it. All right? It has to be only a one-way relationship. Then the third factor, Q mayan shing nubo dan yimpe shi tumpa dumadrup. That one means there must exist multiple other things which are both not it is what the phrase says, but it means the characteristic in question, the water pitcher. There must be things that are not water pitcher and B are still characteristic of the quality working thing. So in order for water pitcher to be the chedak of the chi working thing, we must be able to establish that there are other things not water pitcher that are still characteristic of working things. And it's like by now my mind is saying, you've been saying the same thing over and over and over. And as soon as we see a water pitcher, we know it's a working thing. We know it's different than working thingness. We know there are other working things that are not, like we know all this. But to outline it, excuse me, I'm getting something in my throat. To slow ourselves down and make ourselves check is what I'm calling a thing characteristic of the quality. Does it really fit these criteria to be sure? It's going to serve us later to just play with that about things. You know, you're sitting at dinner and look at your fork. It's like, here's a chedak. What's it a chedak of? You can say fork. Right? Here's a specific instance of things called fork. Yeah, well, are all forks the same? No, of course, right? There's that kind of fork and that kind of fork and this one and that one. So there are multiple things that qualify as things characteristic of the quality called fork. And then you can look at the quality called fork and say, well, is that something characteristic of a bigger category. Of course, utensils. And then you can go bigger, and you can go bigger, and you can go bigger, and you can go smaller. You can take your fork. And what would be if this fork were the general, what would be the specific? What would be a chedok of this fork? And that exercise is one that is planting seeds in our minds for this ability to go looking for the thing that gets the label, to never find it. Do you remember that? Not that we never find anything. We never come up empty-handed. We always come up empty-handed. But we end up recognizing, oh, everything's this process happening. This is going to help us do that, this exercise. All right. So Geshe-la says, once we establish the chi-chedok relationship, such as the water pitcher is chedok, a thing characteristic of the general type called working thing, he says, we can say, so see, water pitcher is characteristic of working thing. And he says, if you say it like that, then you don't really care much whether or not you come to see emptiness directly. What he means, it won't help much to say, oh, see, now I know it. He says, or you could say, I've come to know that there are many things which are characteristic of the quality working thing, which are not water pitchers. Son of a gun. By recognizing water pitcher as a chedok of chi working things, we then recognize that there are many things characteristic of the quality working thing, which are not water pitchers. He says there's a huge difference between that statement and the previous one, which is water pitcher is one kind of working thing. It has to do with the not water pitcher as we are explaining the water pitcher. So it has to do with this negation of something helping to establish that something's actually there. And it's just subtle seeds. His example of car, and a car, your car, is, gee, there are many objects which are characteristic of carness, which are not my car, which are not Chevys. He says it forces us to think mental images. It's like, really? Chew on it until it does. So according to high school, every single perception that we've ever had until the direct perception of emptiness is mistaken, because every perception we've ever had have been these mental images of things that we've mistaken as the thing itself. Like every moment of forever, we've been doing that. And because of that mistake, we create the causes for all of our suffering. because we don't realize that those experiences are our own mental seed ripening results of how we imprinted our mind with our behavior before. So we don't realize that how we interact with that thing that we're mistaking to be the real object is the cause for how we experience something in the future. We think our behavior brings other kinds of results. We don't believe that our behavior in the moment is creating. We think it's reacting. We think it's solving a problem. But it's not, it's planting a seed. So we see things characteristic of qualities and don't realize them as only our mental image making us see it that way. We've been thinking that cheese and chaydocks are the same thing. And it's so interesting because chi being the general quality, the idea, the chaydock being the specific instant of the idea. And we get really used to understanding that we're thinking of them as being the same thing, and that's not right. Then we meet Master Kamala Shila's commentary on the Diamond Cutter Sutra. And he takes us to recognizing, oh my gosh, the cheese and the chaydocks, now called Rangsen and Jitsen, they are actually the same thing. Meaning they are mental images at every level that we are considering it. And here at ACI 13, we didn't go there. We tend to think, oh, the ideal is in my mind. It makes up my mind somehow. And then out of the seed ripening matches the image to the ideal. And that's how the relationship happens. But to have the ideal is also seed ripening. Now, is it the same seed or a different seed? That's not quite clear to me. Seems to me it's got to be a precursor, a different seed. But at this level, we want to be clear that we're recognizing how the ideal carness can't be a mental image landing on something, because that something is specific. And the ideal is not that it's non-specific, because it's got, right? Carness is specific. It's different than horseness. But there isn't a single specific car that is the carness. It's the knowing car. Now, how'd that knowing car get into that mind if you had to have it there as a human baby in the 20th, 21st century for mom to be able to teach us car, that car, your car, my car, good car? It had to be in there already. And where do quote cars come from? The imprint made by helping people get somewhere. Because that's what the general car is about, getting somewhere. If the general car was about ironing your clothes, then somehow you helped somebody iron their clothes before, and then that's ripening the general idea. Labeled, given, in order for us to talk about it, given the name carness, right? Carness doesn't have anything in it from it that means what we think it means. That gets put there by the seed that was planted. from before. So Geshe-la asked and didn't answer. Why do you think there have to be cheese and jadocs to make up to make our world go round? Where do they come from? And he said both of those questions, he said, cook it. Cheese and jadocs cannot be one and the same thing. And both of them had to come from somewhere. He gave us a clue. He says it's hard to get jealous if you realize that getting to be close to the person you want to be close to depends on helping others who want to be close to them get close to them. Like in the place where you're jealous and you want to interfere, instead, you push somebody else further ahead of you. And that's exactly what jealousy doesn't want to do, which means that's what we did before. I mean, that's what we interfered with before. And that's why we're jealous now. So our chewing on why cheese and chadocs are necessary and how they can't be the same thing will help us understand how to behave in the face of life. And it's not obvious, that connection. Okay, let's take a break. And then we're going to explore it again. Did this group do that? Do the identify the object? We didn't do it, did we? Oh, good. We're going to do that one. We'll do that one. Take a break and we'll do the identify the object game when you get back. Okay, are we back? Woohoo. There's my grandma. All right. So we were supposed to have an unknown object in a little bag. So if you have one, we'll do it. If you don't have one, you'll have to do it a little bit differently. The idea of this exercise, if you've not done it before, is to investigate the object just through our tactile sense, little bit by little bit, just using your index finger to explore. So your eyes will be closed. You reach into the bag, you take the object, hold it in one hand, and with just one finger of the other hand, use your left hand just for good luck, and watch your mind and the information that it's getting and what it's doing with that information. So the idea is not to identify the thing fast, it's to perceive the struggle, recognize what information am I getting and what's my mind doing with it, and watch what happens. Right. And then the end, we'll talk about it. So this usually only takes a few minutes. So those who I don't see on the picture, you know, do whatever you can do. But the rest of us, if you've got a little object that you can work with, let's do it now, right? So get your object, don't look at it, and investigate the thing. Once your mind thinks it gets the identity, try to really clarify it And then open your eyes and look at it. And catch, wait, before you do that, when you do look at it, see if you can also catch your mind going, oh, that's what it really is. Instead of going, oh, how interesting, more information. Okay. So now if you care to share, tell me about your experience. Could your index finger give you enough information about the identity of the object? Really?
Yeah, I, I can share. Like when I was touching it by index finger, some images popping out, like what it can be. But then I was touching some parts of it, and associations was about some knife or something, some other kinds of objects. And it was so like dive into that. But then by touching other parts of it said that it can't be like knife because it has something other. Uh, so those like image was popping out, and then there were like images of some other objects which like resembles the class of these objects, some other hair clips kinds of with flowers, etc. But it was not found here any other flowers or something by touching it. And when like opening eyes and look at it, yeah, maybe it's more about like oh, what it is, instead of all the now I have visual information about this object. It's something like more deeper, like instant reaction is like, oh, what, how it looks, what I was contemplating in my mind, something like
Right, right, right. So you were able to see that just from this much information, the mind was trying to make a whole picture. And then the finger would give more information, and then the picture would go, no, that's not right. It has to be this. And then a little more information, no, that's not right. It has to be this. But so was any of that apparent apparently like inner visual? Yeah. How can we get visual picture out of tactile? They're too different, right? That shows us that the our mind playing the part, taking little bits of information and making more out of it than it gets. And we're doing that even when we get full sensory input of the object, we're still making more out of the object with our mind than we get the information of. The other thing that you explored then was that, oh my gosh, there are many other things that are characteristic of whatever this object is, because, oh, there's one that had flowers. This one doesn't have flowers. There would be one, right? Once you had the idea, hair clip, now you're looking for a hair clip that would have felt like this. You had this expectation, not that one. This one, not that one. This one, not that one. Showing that we've got multiple things that are characteristic of the chi hair clip that your mind identified. Nice. Janet, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, Doug likes to keep these little bags of change for tolls,
Uh-huh.
and it just didn't open the way the other one did, but I imagined the color green, and even though it didn't. And then I looked at it and it was blue. And really, I assumed it was American money, and it was, but but sometimes people have travel bags and they keep their pesos and they keep their money or their yen. So I
Yeah.
really didn't know it happened. It was American money, but I realize now
Yeah.
that I just made up all this story. It was this bag on our nightstand and it wasn't. And because we live in America, it's American money and Doug doesn't travel. So you know, but he could have
Right.
taken it from his sister or our neighbor and put it in my bag.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. I was just exploring my hand with one finger. And I knew it was my hand I was exploring, but I tried to remove that and just feel the tactile and explore what I was feeling. And I recognized I could, if I didn't know what I was doing, there is nothing about this information that would end up being hand. Like almost, well, I didn't get over to my finger with the ring there. That might have given it away. But it's like I couldn't get finger out of just touching this. As long as I was just paying attention to the sensation I was getting at the moment, I couldn't get anything specific out of it. I wasn't getting enough information. And that's part of this exercise is to recognize that this process is happening. Information, mental image filling out the whole picture. But that mental image filling out the whole picture can't happen without the indications triggering something. And so right, anyway, good job. I like that exercise. So now the next piece of class 3 has to do with the definitions related to the process of using logic. And a very common early debate that they teach us to teach the process was an actual debate between Buddhists of ancient India and non-Buddhists of ancient India. And the non-Buddhists believed that the sound Om is Takpa, an unchanging, eternal nature of the universe. And the Buddhists, of course, disagree. They say, come on, Om is a sound. Sounds are changing things, changing instant by instant. And so a thing that's changing instant by instant can't be the unchanging eternal nature of the universe. So when you have a debate with someone that has a belief that we believe is a belief that is allowing them to perpetuate their suffering, you don't actually try to convince them that they are wrong. That rather you point out if what they hold as true was true, what would be the ramification in our experience? And then you let them connect the dot. It's like, well, that isn't what happens in experience. So if this is true and that is true and that is true and that is true, then it can't be true what I believe. And they come to their own conclusion. You're not saying you believe something so stupid as Om is an unchanging thing. How far would that go towards changing anybody's mind? So the debate system of logic, they remember we hear them say, You don't use any argument that your opponent doesn't already agree with. And it sounds weird. It's like, well, if they agree with you on everything, what are you debating about? Well, you're debating about this one premise that you don't actually agree with them on. But we use the ways we do agree to get them to come to their own conclusion. So here's the example. They believe Ohm is an unchanging thing, unchanging, permanent nature of the universe. So the debate doesn't say consider Ohm. It says consider sound. Let's consider sound. Okay, says the person who believes Ohm is unchanging. So our subject matter, our topic at hand for our debate is sounds. Sounds would be a chi. We're not saying a specific sound. We're saying the general category sounds. Our assertion about sounds is that they are changing things. Now, the reason we're making that assertion about sounds is because we want to help this other person recognize that if Ohm is a sound, it has to be a changing thing. And if it's a changing thing, it can't be the underlying essence of the universe without itself changing in some way. So consider sounds, all right. Our premise, our assertion is they are changing things. Why do we say that? Our reason is because they are made. In Tibetan, just for good luck. Ja chichen, consider sounds. Mi takte, they are changing things. Mi tak. Chepe cheer, because they are made. So technically, that is all that you need to say. And if the person's going to go along with the investigation, they'll check out the syllogism, find it to be correct, and then it's up to them to say, wait a minute, Ohm is a sound. Gee, if I just agreed that sounds are changing things because they're made, and I was thinking Ohm is permanent. If it's permanent and eternal, it was never made, it can't be made. Maybe there's something I'm misunderstanding about Ohm, is what we're hoping the person will come to that conclusion and they'll want to explore further. So when we are exploring this, the process that we use, we're learning, is first we check whether the statement, our object, and the reason about the object, do they have a relationship? Do they correlate? Is it true that sounds are made things? And I think we can say yes. Can we ever find a sound that isn't made by something? Now, our opponent would say, well, yeah, Ohm. And then we'd have to go somewhere different. But in our own natural world, every sound is made by something, right? Science just says it's vibration. And then we can be aware of the sound because we have the apparatus that allows us to be aware of the sound. So if 1 and 3 have a relationship, we can go on with the exploration. If they didn't, if we were to say, consider sounds, they are changing things because they're green, we would look at statement 1 and statement 3, sounds. Are sounds ever green? No. You'd have to throw the whole thing out. But it fits. Sounds are made things. Set that one aside. The next statement we check if 3 is true. Not whether or not it's true, just if it is true, if it were true. Then would that necessarily mean that our assertion about it is also true? So this is the logic. If it's true that sounds are made, is it necessarily true that they are changing? So yeah, right? To be made, to be created, they go from not to existing. That's change. And then even if we say, yeah, but once it's there, it stays the same for forever, we would investigate that and find that no, in fact, it doesn't stay the same for forever because every instant of it is wearing it out if there's no new factor that's making it again. So if something is a made thing, is it necessarily true that they are changing things? Yeah, at the very bottom line, they had to change once. And if they changed once, they're changing things. And of course, they are changing moment by moment. If when we said the reason, because they are made, our assertion does not necessarily hold true, then the whole thing gets thrown out. Right? In our case, it does. If we had said, consider sounds, they are things that make color because they are made. Just because they're made, does that necessarily mean they make color? No, that's silly. Even though it's equally silly to say that sounds make color, but they do make other things. So if 1 and 3 holds, and if 3 is true, then 2 must be true holds, then we check, we negate our assertion and see what that does to our reason. So not it just in by logic, if we negate our reason and it necessarily, if we negate our assertion and it necessarily negates our reason, then our syllogism holds. So we negate statement 2 if sounds are not changing things, not whether or not they are, just if it were true that they're not changing things, then would it also be true that they couldn't be made things? Yes. So we just confirmed that this simple little syllogism, consider sounds, they are changing things because they are made, proves the fact that sounds are changing things. So if that other person agreed, sounds are made, yes. If they're made, they're changing, yes. If they're not changing, they can't be made. Yeah. Well, what about Om? And you let them go home and cook it, is the idea. So now consider, we'll take it a little bit more subtle. Let's consider the fact that sounds are changing. Is that Takpa or me Takpa? Is that unchanging or not unchanging? The fact that sounds are changing.
Well, according to the answer key, it's an unchanging thing. That sound is unchanging.
Correct.
But I got it wrong on the homework because I don't understand any of this.
That's why we're here. We're learning about it, learning how to chew on it, begging the Lama, please help me, Omara Pachanadi. Using Vajrasattva to clear our obstacles. We have the tools. Yeah, it threw me for a loop, I remember. Consider sounds, consider the fact that sounds are changing. That fact is unchanging because sounds are always changing. The fact that sound is changing is unchanging because it has never been the case that sound is not changing.
Is this from the second school? Is that what our issue is? Is this the second school talking here?
I think it is,
Because
but
I kind
highest
of remember
schools,
I studied anatomy and my Lama said, "No, those things you see are not coming from your retina. They're coming from your back seat."
he is
But they're
right.
saying they're coming from facts. If it's a fact, it's an unchanging thing. And there's no mention here that they're coming from your past actions.
No, no, they aren't talking about past actions yet. But keep in mind that lower schools who believe that things that function have some nature of their own in order to function. They're not self-existent because they depend on something. And in that process of things being things, our behavior does matter. Lower schools hold dependent origination still at karma is true. They don't understand it at the same subtlety that highest school explains it. They do rely on karma. So Geshe was making this point that facts, things that are facts, the truth about sound's nature never changes. But the sound itself is changing all the time. So it's like, yeah, but what's that really telling us?
It tells us the answer to the question in the homework.
It does. Thank you for that. Truths, facts are truths. But it's like, okay, so I look up a fact in the dictionary and 25 years later, they reprint the dictionary, and now that fact is different. So it wasn't a scientific fact at all. Given what we knew at the moment, we called it a fact, but now it's different. And it's like that's not the kind of facts we're talking about here. We are talking about things that don't change, things that always hold true. And really, when we get down to it, the only thing we'll ever find as fact, I would put forth, is the fact that nothing has any nature of its own in the way that we think, at whatever level we understand that. So Geshe-la said, listen, this is cryptic. The set of all things about which we can say sound is changing is exactly equal to the set of all things about which we can say they exist, which is that exactly equal to the entire set of things about which we can say they have no nature of their own, or to say they are only our projections, they are empty. The fact that these are all exactly equivalent sets never changes. This is truth itself. He gave this example that I still don't quite understand. He says, consider Sarani. Sarani exists because sound is a changing thing. And he says that is a correct and accurate syllogism. And then he said, cook it. Don't you love it? You know, we hear in the highest school that sometimes the scripture will say, even though things are empty, they still exist and function. And Geshe-la has been so careful to correct or to fine-tune that and say, technically, it's because things have no nature that they function. Because if something had a nature of its own, it wouldn't depend on any other factor. And if something doesn't depend on any other factor, then no other factor can influence it, which means it can't ever change, which means it can't ever do anything, which means it can't even be experienced by somebody. So because things have no nature, they exist. But does that make them exist from their own side in their own way? No, they exist according to whomever it is projecting their existence. So do they exist? It gets really slippery. Yes, they exist by way of my projection. But do they exist without my projection? Do you disappear when I turn off my Zoom? No, your life goes on. I know your life goes on. My experience of you in the moment ends, but you don't become nothing or nobody. But what if I had never met you before and I before I met you? Did you exist? Sure, for you and everybody who knows you. But I can't say, did you exist for me? I can't say yes, but I can't say no. Because as soon as I did meet you, you were already an adult. So with the you that I met at your whatever adult age, I also met the fact that you had had a childhood and you had gotten born and you had previous lifetimes and yet I haven't experienced all of those things. All I get, right, is these few moments together and Zoom and sometimes live. So it's like the conundrum of coming to this conclusion, oh, nothing is anything but my projections. And the wrong conclusion being, well, then I'm the only real thing, is like wrong. Or that no, but they only exist when I'm experiencing them. It's like, no, wrong. But then the ones that I think are there independent of me, they don't exist either, wrong, right? We're trying to learn this method of being able to check what we think is true, be able to check whether it can really be like that, and we experience things in the way that we do, which in our old view of how we experience things, we would think, yeah, fine, people live everywhere. I don't have to know all of them for them to exist. And then we meet the teachings and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm the one making them exist. And what happens when I'm not thinking of them? And then the pendulum swings back the other way and it's like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. I can relax a bit, right? Yes, they are all flowing from my seeds and I just keep perpetuating it by way of, trying to act with kindness instead of selfishness, and I can perpetuate this world of happy beings, is the idea. Because they have no nature of their own. They all exist in the way that they do for me, and the way that they do for you, and the way that they do for everybody. All right, we have a few things yet. He gave us definitions for our formal logic. And we already had that the subject, the first statement is the subject. In this syllogism, it's the consider sounds, the draw chichen. And then second statement is the assertion we make about our object of consideration. And then third statement is we make the reason we give about the assertion that we want to prove about the topic of consideration. So there are a couple of more things we need to also know. There's this thing called the group of similar cases. Tunchok, it means. The group of similar cases, things which are similar to the quality that we are trying to prove. So things that would be in the category of our assertion is this thing called the Tunchok, group of similar cases. And then there's something called the drupje chu, which is the quality we're trying to prove. So in this statement, consider sounds, they are changing things. In that is the implication that we know other things that are changing things. We know about them. We know what they are. We can use them for comparison, I guess. And then we know the drupje chu, which is the quality we're trying to prove. We understand what it means to be a changing thing in this assertion. So when we make our assertion, we need to know what we're talking about. We want to know what we're talking about so that our assertion can actually apply to the topic at hand. right? If we don't know what sounds are, how can we make an assertion that they are changing things? We have to know that already. And then if sounds and changing things, if there aren't other changing things that are not sound, then we would be talking about the same thing, sounds and changing things, and it wouldn't be an assertion about sound. We would just be saying the same thing as consider sounds. They are sounds because they're made, and that's not a logical syllogism. So what? So to determine if our logical statement reveals truth, we investigate something called the three relationships. And that's what we talked about already. We check the relationship between the topic of consideration and the reason. We check the relationship between the reason and the assertion. And then we check the relationship between the assertion and the reason. But when we do those last two, one is we check for the positive necessity, and the third one is we check for the negative necessity. So the way we check is that we look for things that are similar, the tunchok, similar cases, and we look for things that are mitunchok, which is the group of dissimilar cases. So these are the other thing we need to know about the object and our assertion and our reason is whether they are similar cases or dissimilar cases. And in the group of dissimilar cases, there are three kinds. Get here. Mitunchok. Three ways to recognize the dissimilar cases to use that in our evaluation of the three relationships. This isn't very clear yet. Here are the three: Mepa mitunchok, Shempa mitunchok, Gelwa mitunchok. Mepa means non-existent things that are dissimilar. So that means if we find in the argument, I don't know how to quite verbalize it. What it means is non-existing things. We've heard the two common examples of non-existing things are horns on a rabbit's head in our world and sky flowers, meaning a plant that blooms that's just in midair. It's not in a pot of soil. Nobody's made it. Just there's a flower in midair. Those things can't qualify as being a similar case to make the case in a syllogism to prove something because they're non-existent. You can't use a non-existent thing to prove something. So we need to be careful in our syllogisms, in our assertion and reason, that we don't give a non-existent thing as our reasoning or as our assertion. Then, second kind of thing that's dissimilar is Shempa mi tunchok. Shempa means other thing, but other means something that's in a larger category beyond the quality we're talking about. So, for example, when we said all existing things is a bigger category than all changing things. So you couldn't use those two, all existing things and all changing things, as a similar case, using one thing to prove the other by way of similarity, because one's bigger than the other. Again, it reminds us of the study of the Chi and the Chedak, right? The big category and the things that are specific to it. It's coming into play here, just the idea of that, not the thing about mental images so much. Then the third kind of things that are dissimilar is gewa, mi tuncho. Gewa means contradiction, meaning something is the complete opposite of the quality that we're trying to prove. So we wouldn't say something like consider consider sound. It's a changing thing because of all existing things. And it's like all existing things is too big a category to use as a reason for sound being a changing thing. If sound is part of the category of all existing things, it could be a changing thing, but it could still be an unchanging thing, because in the category of all existing things is unchanging things and changing things. I'm sorry, that's an example for Shempa, for too big a category. The example of Gelwa, contradictory, you wouldn't say consider sound, it's a changing thing, because it's not unchanging, or because it's changing. It's a changing thing because it's not unchanging. You can't say the opposite. If you say the opposite, I'm not doing a good job here. If you use a reason that contradicts your assertion, it's not going to be a reason for your assertion. And it's like, well, why would we do that? That's why we're there. We're learning about it, because apparently we do stuff like that. Like, we give a reason that's contradictory to our assertion. If we were to think it through, we wouldn't do that, but we tend not to. We need the 1 and 3 to have a relationship of similar cases. We need the if 3 then 2 to have a relationship through similar cases. Not 3, not 2 has a relationship of the opposite in the sense of similar cases. And if you're using as your relationship of 1 and 3, 3 and 2, not 2, not 3, things that are either non-existent or has too big a meaning or is contradictory, then your statement fails. Even if it seems like in life that is how we experience it. Mm. So just park that information. It's gonna come together, hopefully by the end of class, about the criteria that we use to evaluate our syllogism and whether things are similar or dissimilar. And how do we know they're dissimilar? They're either non-existent, they're too big a category, or they're contradictory. That's what we look for, right? Ta-da! We're done a little bit early. Thanks for hanging in there. So remember that one, we wanted to be able to help at the beginning of class. Believe it or not, we've learned a lot that we will use sooner or later to help them in that deep end ultimate way. And that's a great, great, great goodness. So please be happy with yourself. And think of this goodness like a beautiful glowing gemstone that you can hold in your hands. Recall your own precious holy being. See how happy they are with you. Feel your gratitude to them, your reliance upon them. Ask them to please stay close, to continue to guide you, help you, inspire you. And then offer this gemstone of goodness to them. See them accept it and bless it. And they carry it with them right back into your heart. See them there, feel them there. Their love, their compassion, their wisdom. It feels so good, we want to keep it forever. And so we know to share it by the power of the goodness that we've just done. May all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the two ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. So use those 3 long exhales to share this goodness with that one person. To share it with everyone you love. To share it with every existing being everywhere. See them all filled with loving kindness, filled with wisdom. And may it be so. Okay, thank you. Any burning questions?
Are we a class behind, or did he take 2 classes to do this one?
No, we're a class behind Geshe Michael.
All right.
Actually, more than that, because I'm not doing the debate part. The actual debate, which he also did. But it isn't always on the recording, because his classes went long. Okay. All right, see you. Have fun. We are Thursday.